Mapleshade trekked back to the forest, skirting the edge of WindClan under the cover of darkness and heading for ThunderClan's border with Two Lake Place. She knew she would have to wait for Frecklewish to pass by on patrol. Even then, Mapleshade would need the luck of StarClan to get the she-cat alone. She plunged into the lush green grass at the foot of the two-leg fences, then scrambled up over the wooden barrier, dropping down into the small, strongly scented enclosure on the other side. Almost at once, a fat gray and white Tom heaved himself through a tiny flap in the side of the two-leg den and lumbered towards her, mewling.
"Get out of here! You're one of those stinking forest cats, aren't you? My housefolk don't want you in their backyard. Shoo!"
Mapleshade waited until the kitty pet was a mouse length away. Then she shot out one paw and raked his face. The kitty pet leapt backwards, screeching.
Ow!
Blood dripped from his blunt muzzle. Mapleshade stayed where she was. The kitty pet glared at her through screwed-up eyes before turning and shuffling back into the den. When the flap banged shut behind his plump haunches, Mapleshade studied the enclosure. A tree grew beside the fence, with broad enough branches to support her, and dense leaves to hide her from view. She would wait there for Frecklewish. She scrambled up the tree and settled on the bough that looked out over the forest. She had caught a squirrel at Four Trees, and drunk from a stream so her belly was comfortably full. Resting her chin on her paws, she let herself doze. One ear pricked for any sounds from below. At dusk, 4 ThunderClan warriors came past, creeping along the bottom of the fence, as if they feared the kitty pets were about to attack. Mapleshade curled her lip in scorn. She had thought her clanmates were braver than that. Frecklewish was not among them, though. As night fell, Mapleshade dropped down from her branch into the long grass, hoping to hunt. ThunderClan's scent surrounded her, and for a moment she felt a pang of longing. Then she pictured her clanmates, driving her and her kits away, and she thought of Frecklewish watching her kits drowned, and her fury returned. She quickly caught a blackbird that was wrestling with a worm and carried it back to the tree. Behind her, the gray and white Tom was bundled out of the den by a cross-sounding two-leg. Mapleshade watched the kitty pet squat on the grass, its eyes huge with fear, then race back inside. He knows this territory is mine now. Mapleshade slept fitfully, the bark digging into her belly fur and sending a damp chill through her bones. She woke with the first glimmer of dawn, feeling pangs of hunger. The blackbird had been old and scrawny. Mapleshade scanned the forest for signs of movement. All was still beneath the trees. She jumped down and padded into the ferns, scanning for prey. A tiny rustle alerted her to a mouse scrabbling at the foot of a sycamore tree. Mapleshade stalked forward, hoping her flashes of white fur wouldn't startle her prey. The mouse was intent on nibbling on a seed, so Mapleshade was able to pounce unseen, killing the creature with a single blow to its neck. Then she froze. She heard voices. Bloomheart was among them, directing his patrol to split up and hunt, before meeting again at the lightning-struck elm. There wasn't enough time to get back to the two-leg fence, so Mapleshade crouched beneath a clump of bracken with her fresh kill. Paw steps came closer. Then, a glimpse of brown fur through the green stems. Frecklewish. StarClan had brought her right to Mapleshade, but she couldn't attack her here, not when the others were so close by. Mapleshade backed carefully out of the bracken, dragging the mouse. Its body was still warm, so the scent it left would seem fresh. Sure enough, she heard Frecklewish sniffing at the air and uttering a low growl that suggested that she had picked up the trail. Mapleshade let the mouse scrape along the ground a little more before daring to pick it up and move forward with it dangling from her jaws. She couldn't risk being seen by Frecklewish before she had reached Snake Rocks. Mapleshade deliberately pushed her way through the thickest undergrowth so that the mouse left a generous trail of scent. She hoped that her own scent would be lost among the general ThunderClan odors. She didn't think that she had been out of the clan long enough to smell unfamiliar. She could only just hear Frecklewish stalking her. The she-cat had been one of the best hunters in the clan, and moved as lightly as a butterfly's wing over the leaf-strewn ground. Suddenly, dark gray stones loomed over the stems of bracken. Mapleshade swerved, still carrying the mouse, which felt heavier and heavier in her jaws. She padded around the base of the rocks and emerged into a clearing on the other side. There was hardly any trace of cat scent. Clearly, the warriors were concerned that the adders might escape from their prison. Mapleshade hoped that the snakes were still there. But there was no time to check. She left the mouse on the ground and raced towards a heap of smaller stones that had been piled in front of the adder's nest. She pushed aside as many as she could, leaving a gaping black hole. Then ducked behind a boulder. Frecklewish emerged cautiously from the bushes, her jaws parted to scent the air, and her fur bristling. She looked puzzled when she saw the dead mouse. It was then that Mapleshade sprang out from behind the rock and snarled at her. "You let my kits die!" Frecklewish stumbled backwards in shock. Mapleshade! You shouldn't be here! She arched her back. "Leave, or I'll call the rest of the patrol!" Mapleshade lashed her tail. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a tiny flicker of movement from the pile of stones. Was that a snake slithering into the light? Mapleshade took a step closer to the rocks. "What, are you too scared to fight me yourself, Frecklewish?" she hissed. "No, you prefer watching helpless kids drowned, don't you?" The brown she-cat stiffened. I thought your kids would be saved," she rasped. "I never meant for them to die." Mapleshade sniffed. "I don't believe you. You're a fox-hearted coward. I bet you're glad they're dead." Frecklewish bounded towards Mapleshade, her eyes flashing with anger. "I wish you were dead," she spat. You betrayed my brother's name." Mapleshade dodged sideways just as Frecklewish lunged at her. With a yelp, the she-cat stumbled into the pile of stones. Before she could find her footing, there was a hiss, and a sleek, dark green head darted forward, tongue flicking. "Adder!" gasped Frecklewish. There was a blur of movement, and then Frecklewish staggered backwards, screeching. "Ah! It hit me! Help!" "Oh, like how you helped my kids," Mapleshade growled. "Never. I hope you die in agony." Frecklewish yelled again, a wordless shriek of pain. Almost at once, paw steps thrummed towards them through the trees. "Frecklewish, is that you?" called Bloomheart. Mapleshade slipped into a clump of bracken at the far side of the clearing. She knew she should flee before the patrol arrived, but she wanted to watch Frecklewish die. With a crackling of undergrowth, Bloomheart and two other ThunderClan warriors, Seedpelt and Thrushtalon, burst into the clearing. "Keep watch for snakes," Bloomheart ordered. His clanmates spun around and scanned the rocks. Bloomheart bent over Frecklewish, who was curled on the ground with her paws over her eyes. "It's all right, Frecklewish. We're here now." "My eyes!" wailed Frecklewish. "I can't see!" Bloomheart lifted his head. "Oh, StarClan, if we ever needed Ravenwing, it's now. Why did you take him from us?" Then he shook himself and faced his clanmates. "Seedpelt, we need soaked moss as fast as you can. We have to wash the venom out of her eyes. Thrushtalon, fetch every scrap of fennel that you can find in the medicine stores. We have to try and save Frecklewish's eyesight." The two warriors darted away. Bloomheart placed his paw on Frecklewish's flank. "Lie still," he meowed. "We're doing everything we can." "But ThunderClan doesn't have a medicine cat," Frecklewish whimpered. "Am I going to die?" "Not on my watch," Bloomheart vowed. Mapleshade felt bile rise in her throat as her former mentor soothed the cat who had watched her kits drowned. Frecklewish's eyes were a seeping, clouded mess. Even if she survived, she would never watch anything again. Mapleshade knew that she had to leave before the rest of ThunderClan rushed to help Frecklewish. She crept through the undergrowth to the thickest part of the forest, then raced back to the two-leg fence. Cries of alarm filtered through the trees as more warriors arrived at Snake Rocks. The sounds faded as Mapleshade scrambled over the fence and crouched on the bare brown earth, panting. Only one voice echoed in her ears now. Patch Kid, her tiniest, most defenseless kid.
Help me, Mama.
Her daughter, Petalkid, had found peace with the attack on Frecklewish. Like with Larchkid, her desperate cries had been silenced. For a moment, Mapleshade's breath was crushed beneath a wave of grief for a son and daughter she might never see again. Then, she clenched her jaw and pictured the final cat who had to suffer for the death of her kits. Not long now, Patch Kid, she vowed. Soon, you will be free. Dusk fell, bringing with it a cold, damp wind. Mapleshade jumped down from the fence in the forest and followed the boundary to the edge of the two-lake place. Raindrops pattered around her as she reached the pine trees, whose spindly trunks and whispering needles gave little shelter. Mapleshade padded softly over the forest floor, staying well outside the ThunderClan border as she skirted the tree-cap place, which was silent and dark now, and plunged back into the dense undergrowth. Brambles scraped her pelt and blocked her way, but Mapleshade kept pushing through, ears pricked for the first sounds of the river. By now, the rain was falling more heavily, rattling the leaves and stalks around Mapleshade's ears. She gasped when she suddenly emerged from a clump of stiff grasses to find herself at the top of a steep bank with the river sliding past, thick, black, and deadly, just a tail length below. She scrambled backwards with a hiss. For a moment, she thought she saw 3 small shapes twisting and tumbling in the water, but it was only a reflection of starlight. Mapleshade stared at the reeds growing on the far shore. Somewhere in there was the RiverClan camp, perched like a bird's nest above the sodden ground. If she strained her ears past the sound of rain, she could almost hear the murmuring of cats as they settled down for the night. Mapleshade pictured Apple Dusk, laying in his den with Reedshine curled beside him, her orange pelt merging with his soft brown fur. The hair rose on Mapleshade's neck and she bared her teeth. Apple Dusk will regret the day he met me. All those times he said he loved me. All the promises that he made. They were nothing but lies. He never wanted my kits, so he let them drown. He could have saved them. I know he could have. Behind her, the sky was lightening above the trees. Dawn was still a while off, but Mapleshade felt more comfortable traveling in darkness. So, instead of giving in to the urge to sleep, she picked her way downstream along the bank. There was a ridge of little stones stretching across the river down here. She had used them to cross to meet Apple Dusk on the other side once. There was no way that Mapleshade was going to swim across the river, but she could wait if she had to. She reached the stones, invisible in the dark, but recognizable by the way the noise of the river changed as it flowed over them. Shuddering, Mapleshade jumped down the bank and waded in. Her belly fur was instantly soaked, and she gasped at the cold. She forced her legs through the current, feeling the water tug against her and splash her flanks. The river was much slower and shallower than it had been when she had tried to cross with her kits. She still hated every paw step, and she hissed with relief when she hauled herself onto the far bank. She lay there for a while, panting, as the water trickled from her fur. It had stopped raining, but the sky was thick with clouds, and the wind was growing stronger, scented with more rain to come. Mapleshade forced herself to stand and to keep going, plunging into the reeds that were stiff and springy, so that they flicked her face and tripped her tired paws. She pushed forward until she detected RiverClan's border marks. Then, she retraced her steps so that she was following the edge of the territory safely out of scent range. Dense reeds gave way to softer undergrowth, dotted with low, slender-branched willow trees. Her belly rumbled, but she didn't dare hunt, in case it alerted the RiverClan cats. Sounds carried too easily on this side of the river. Gradually, the ground became firmer and drier beneath her paws. The air was filled with green, leafy scents rather than the taint of fish. Mapleshade reached a dense stand of trees, leafier and sturdier than the other willows. The territory border was just close enough that she could look down from the branches and watch for passing cats. With a sigh, she recalled just how much time she had spent up a tree recently. Mapleshade clawed her way up the nearest trunk and eased herself onto one of the lower boughs. Without knowing the habits of RiverClan warriors, she hadn't been able to think of a plan to trap Apple Dusk alone. She would just have to learn what she could from watching. Mapleshade fluffed up her fur against the cold and waited. She was rewarded quite soon by a cluster of paw steps crackling nearer. An early hunting patrol, chattering and crashing through the undergrowth as if they wanted to alert all the prey to their approach. Mapleshade curled her lip, thinking of ThunderClan's stealth. The patrol passed right under her branch without noticing her. Before their noise had faded, more cats approached. The breeze carried a scent that made Mapleshade's nostrils flare. A heartbeat later, the bracken parted to reveal a pale brown cat, broad-shouldered beneath his thick, glossy fur. Apple Dusk. Once again, StarClan had brought Mapleshade's prey right to her paws. But then, the stalks rustled, and a plump gray apprentice bundled out. He crouched down and leaped forward, stubby front legs outstretched. Apple Dusk shook his head. "You need more height than that, Perchpaw," he chided. "You must be prepared to fight full-grown warriors when you go into battle." The young cat's blue eyes stretched wide.
I will get taller, won't I?
Apple Dusk purred. "Of course you will, but you still need to learn how to jump."
Why don't I spring out at you and show you how it's done?
An orange cat slipped into the clearing. Mapleshade's hackles bristled. Can't Reedshine let Apple Dusk do anything on his own? Apple Dusk went to meet his clanmate and rubbed his cheek against hers. "Oh, I'm not letting you do anything," he mewed. "Think of our kits." Reedshine glanced at her belly, barely swollen beneath her pelt. "I'm not sick," she protested. "Oh, I know you're not," meowed Apple Dusk. "But our kits are too precious to risk Perchpaw injuring you by mistake." Mapleshade gripped the branch so tightly that two of her claws snapped off. She barely noticed the jolt of pain. How could Reedshine be expecting his kits already? How many lies has Apple Dusk told? She bunched her hindquarters beneath her, ready to leap down the moment the Reedshine and Perchpaw left Apple Dusk alone. The three cats moved off together with Perchpaw earnestly discussing battle tactics. Mapleshade crouched in the tree, seething with rage. A cold, wet figure pressed against her flank, screeching for help. Mapleshade tried to curl her tail around her last remaining kit, but there was nothing but empty air beside her. She was dimly aware of being hungry and thirsty, and exhausted after her trek through the night. But nothing mattered now except taking revenge on the cat who had destroyed her world. She would wait here as long as she had to, for the rest of her life, if it meant that she could finally silence Patch Kit's wails. She must have dozed, because she woke with a start much later, when the air was filled with misty rain, and the ferns were filling up with shadows. Something was approaching through the undergrowth. Mapleshade stiffened, wondering if StarClan would bring Apple Dusk to her twice in one day. Then, a bundle of fur blundered into the clearing, skidding to the halt at the foot of the tree. "Take that, ThunderClan Mousestung!" Perchpaw squealed, slapping his paw down on a twig. As the twig snapped, he spun around, ears flattened.
Creep up on me, would you? You're as fox-hearted as your clanmate.
He lurched forward and crushed a large clump of moss. Then, he straightened up and looked down at his enemy.
Oops! I should have taken that back to the Elder's Den.
Oh, I'll look for some more. He trotted towards Mapleshade's tree, peering at the roots. Mapleshade let go of the branch and plummeted straight down onto the apprentice's back, knocking him to the ground with a ugh. Before Perchpaw could figure out what was happening, Mapleshade grabbed his scruff in her teeth and hauled him past the tree, across the border. Her eyes bulged with the effort. The fat apprentice weighed more than a badger. Perchpaw yowled and thrashed, but Mapleshade sank her teeth further into his pelt until he stopped struggling.
"Who are you? What do you want?"
he growled. Mapleshade placed one paw heavily on his shoulders and snarled. "Keep still or I'll rip your throat out." Perchpaw blinked.
"I'm a RiverClan warrior. Let me go."
"No, you're not," Mapleshade hissed. "You're a stupid apprentice. It's all right. I'm not interested in killing you. I only want you as bait." When Perchpaw tried to speak, she forced his face into the ground, muffling his protests. Then she squatted down, resting most of her bulk onto his haunches, and waited. "Perchpaw! Perchpaw! Where are you?" Mapleshade almost purred. A moment later, Apple Dusk trotted into the clearing, his eyes troubled. Why can't you do what you're told for once? He complained, looking around. If I find out that you've been practicing battle moves instead of collecting moss, you're gonna be in big trouble, Perchpaw. Mapleshade gripped Perchpaw's neck fur in her teeth, dragged him out from behind the tree. She let the apprentice fall to the ground. Is this what you're looking for, Appledusk? The warrior stared at her in horror. You were told to leave our territory. Mapleshade twitched the tip of her tail. And you thought I would? You're more mouse-brained than I thought. You killed our kits. And now, you must pay. Appledusk bared his teeth. What are you talking about? You killed our kits, making them cross the river. Let Perchpaw go and get out of here before I call a patrol. Mapleshade jumped over Perchpaw and stood in front of the brown warrior, pelt bristling, paws planted firmly. You can have that useless lump of fur back, she snarled. But you'll have to fight me first. Appledusk took a step back. His eyes clouded and he suddenly looked weary. Mapleshade, I don't want to fight you, he meowed. I'm not giving you a choice, Mapleshade hissed. She bunched her hindquarters beneath her and lunged at him. Appledusk dodged away. Just leave, he gasped. There was a crackle of stalks behind him, and Reedshine appeared. What's going on? Her gaze fell on Mapleshade. What's she doing here? Half blind with fury, Mapleshade hurled herself at the orange she-cat. You and your kits must die, she screeched. Appledusk is mine! She unsheathed her claws, aiming for Reedshine's face. There was a thud of paws, then silence, and a solid brown shape flashed in front of Mapleshade. Her claws struck home, piercing fur and flesh, and a spurt of blood leapt out at her. With a grunt, Appledusk dropped at her feet, blood pouring from his throat. In the same moment, a heavy weight struck Mapleshade from behind. Perchpaw gripped her with his paws and bit down hard on her neck. Mapleshade staggered forward and almost fell. Perchpaw slid off her back. Mapleshade could feel him trembling against her flank. And then, she realized that she was the one who was shaking. Why? I'm not frightened. He's dead! Reedshine shrieked, crouching beside Appledusk. Her horrified eyes ringed with white. You killed him! Mapleshade tried to step forward, but her legs felt strangely heavy, and her vision was blurred. Is it raining? She wondered. Something hot and wet spilled down her front legs, and there was a dull ache behind her ears. She shook her head, and bright red droplets splattered the ground, like tiny fallen leaves. Something small, ginger, and white stirred beside Appledusk's unmoving body.
You killed him, Mama!
Shrilled Patch Kid. His little tail was held high with triumph.
We're all free now.
He started to fade against his father's light brown fur. Mapleshade stumbled towards her son. Wait! She gasped. Don't leave me! Reedshine rose up from behind Appledusk and hissed at Mapleshade. Don't come any closer! What you have done has been more terrible than what any clan cat has done before. But you have not won, Mapleshade. Appledusk will live on in his kits, and in their kits, and in their kits in turn. His spirit will not die. He will be a part of RiverClan forever. Mapleshade swayed, feeling the soil sticky beneath her paws. Then I will watch over all your kin and punish each one for what you did to me. My vengeance is not finished yet. It will never be finished. She lurched towards the bushes behind the willow tree, and she dimly heard Perchpaw start to follow her. But Reedshine called him back. She has done enough harm, Mapleshade heard her mew. Let her crawl away to die alone. Mapleshade forced her way through the undergrowth. She felt no pain, just a strange numbness that seemed to be spreading throughout her body. She reached the edge of the bushes, and the walls of the two-leg den where she had slept on her first night of exile. loomed up in front of her. But Mapleshade was too weak to go any further. She slumped to the ground, feeling dirt and tiny stones grind into her blood-soaked fur. She closed her eyes, waiting for the faces of her kids to appear, thanking her for what she had done. But there was nothing behind her eyes except for swirling darkness, battered by an icy wind, and unbroken by even a glimmer of stars. Mapleshade felt the first stirrings of fear. "StarClan, where are you?" she wailed into the endless night. "Where are my kids?" A small, furry face appeared blurrily in front of her eyes. "Hatch Kid?" Mapleshade gasped. She tried to reach out one paw.
"It's you!"
exclaimed the cat.
"Do you remember me? I'm Myler. We met once before."
Mapleshade felt his nose press along her flank.
"You're badly hurt,"
meowed the little cat.
"You poor thing. Come on, let's get you inside."
With surprising strength, he boosted Mapleshade to her feet, and with his shoulder, he guided her into the two-leg den. Mapleshade collapsed onto a pile of hay. "I have lost everything," she thought. "What do I have left to live for?" There was a bustle of movement beside her, and the black and white cat started dabbing at her fur with a wet piece of moss. Mapleshade was too weary to push him away. She half opened one eye and saw blood flowing freely down her shoulder, pooling beneath her.
"Oh, there's too much! Too much!"
fretted Myler. He dabbed more frantically.
"Did a clan cat do this to you?"
Mapleshade closed her eye again and nodded. The little cat sighed.
"Ah, there's no end to their wilderness and thirst for blood,"
he murmured.
"You should have left when you had the chance."
"Leave? How could I ever leave? I swore to avenge the deaths of my kids, and that's what I've done. And yet, that vengeance is not over, because Appledusk will live on in Reedshine's kids. I will never be finished." Myler curled up beside her, hardly flinching as his fur pressed against her bloody body.
"I'll stay with you,"
he promised.
"You're safe now."
Mapleshade unsheathed her scarlet broken claws. "Leave me alone," she rasped, forcing herself to lift her head and glare at her companion. "I don't need anyone." The black and white cat stood up and looked down on her with sadness in his eyes.
"I think you're wrong,"
he whispered, but he turned and padded into the hay-scented darkness. For a moment, Mapleshade longed to call him back, but sleep was dragging at her, heavier than stones and stronger than the river. She closed her eyes and watched her mind fill with churning shadows, pierced by shrieks of terror that made her jump. She realized that she could feel the ground beneath her paws, cold and sodden and stinking like the river. Somehow, she could walk again, strength flowing back into her limbs and her vision clearing. She emerged into a half-lit clearing, surrounded by gray tree trunks. Although she felt no fear, she was aware of being watched by unseen eyes. "Am I dead?" she meowed out loud, listening to her voice echo between the trees. "Is this StarClan?" She looked up, but there were no stars in the thick black sky above her, not even a glimmer of silver beyond the rustling leaves. Instead, what light there was seemed to come from the fleshy fungus growing on the roots of the trees, and from the slimy trunks themselves.
"Not StarClan,"
whispered a voice from somewhere behind her.
"This is the Dark Forest, the place of no stars. We welcome you, Mapleshade."
Mapleshade spun around. "Who are you? Show yourself!"
"Never,"
hissed the voice.
"You have come here to walk alone in your blood-soaked memories."
Instead of dread, Mapleshade felt a surge of triumph. If she was here because of what she had endured, then there would be other cats like her. Cats who would understand what she had gone through, who knew what it was like to stand up to their enemies and dole out immeasurable pain. She would find these cats, whatever that voice had told her, and train them to be as strong and fearless as she was. And she would use them to cause more trouble for the clans than warriors could imagine in their worst dreams. Mapleshade had found a place where she truly belonged. From here, she could cause more suffering than she could when she was alive and fighting her battles alone. For all eternity, Appledusk's kin would mourn the day that he had destroyed the life of a ThunderClan warrior. And just as she had promised to Reedshine, Mapleshade's desire for vengeance would never sleep.